Hey, it's Editing Gula popping in. So, this is part of a two-part series. If you didn't watch the first one, I need you to go back and then come listen to this one next.
I was thinking about like the horror stories we could tell. It's funny because I feel like I have more horror stories as a student who is a teacher,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
right?
Because
you know, and you have that different perspective. And like, why are they doing this? Why are they making those suggestions? Why are they touching that person? Why are they pressing this? It's a slippery slope in so many ways. And when I think of horror stories, I think of like the classes I attended as a teacher. And I'm not saying 100% of my classes were like that. Like, I didn't go to class and think, wow, this is awful. But I would go to a class and think, I don't think they should do that. Like, in the sense of like, I don't think that's appropriate. Why are they pressing on me right now? And, I feel like I'm being indoctrinated right now. Like, and it's different once you go through training. Cause, with you, for instance, like being aware of all these things, it's so real. It's like, and you know what it popped in my head, Brie? It's so wild. You're talking about this, like being so ingrained in us. And I'm thinking, yeah, I still struggle with it. I follow people on Instagram and you know what I see? I see photos of the same people over and over, super fit, doing handstands. And I think I'm not that person anymore. I've gone through injury. My body has changed and it makes me feel like I can't do it anymore. Like it's silly. Like, your logical brain is like, don't be silly. You could show up and they would love for you to show up. But my other part is like, oh, but I don't look like them. I'm not that person.
this is so huge. And this is why this matters. And this is why we need to have a sense of these systems that show up in yoga that we unknowingly perpetuate like that, So it's like all good intentioned, but I personally, the work that I've done over the years of like, well, who am I as a teacher? Like, so I teach this in our first of anything, right? It's always like, okay, let's figure out, well, who are we as a teacher? Why are we teaching? How do we want to teach? Who do we want to teach? And when I answer that for myself, it boils down, and a lot of my stuff is like social media based, is how I reach and connect with the community and people. And so it's a very clear, like, you will, and not to say that, like, if you wear a bikini on a beach or a halter top in your or whatever, do you. But for me, because I'm in a white, able-bodied, who the the dominant culture, I was born in, so this is like the genetic lottery, that I'm like, I can move nicely, whatever, I'm blonde, blah, blah, blah. I know that if I don't want to perpetuate that. I want to keep just showing me in jeans. We don't need to see another like white girl in her little halter top doing like a one-armed handstand on a beach, in my opinion. So I don't need to be that. Look at this great little calf stretch we can do at home in our jeans, because I know that's the story that are people coming in, and I'm consciously, hopefully, doing my best to try to disrupt that however we can and how we represent. Because I want to represent this practice as the beautiful ancient wisdom tradition that it is, and not perpetuate the gender norms and the patriarchy and the sexualization of women.
I like unfollowed so many people because I felt it was just more harmful than helpful for me. Inspired, and I want to practice and I want to learn, and then there was just like, I don't think this is doing me any good. I was actually gonna say, I think this is where it's so interesting being like unsocial, but also you having a I think sometimes people forget that you actually have all these other teachers. And so I love that you show them on your social that there's a teacher for, chronic pain, there's physio, we could do chair, it's such a different system. And it's just so much more welcoming because, yeah, I am able-bodied. And sometimes I need to do a version that requires a chair because that's just where I am today. Or
And using a chair is so good and surprisingly effective in ways that we write off, because the dominant story is, well, I don't need to be in a chair. And we know that, like, it's like, again, what you were saying before, it's like we have that one part of our brain that we know this, but then we forget it as it shows up. And actually 5 blocks or a chair or all this stuff actually has a lot of benefit for all bodies.
Like, I would love to ask you, as someone who has, 20 plus years experience, you're way ahead of me, way ahead of a lot of people. What is something that, used to rattle you, but now makes you laugh? Like, people take things so seriously, I feel like, when you first start teaching, and now looking back, you're like, oh man, like.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fun question. And I do want to point out that, like, way ahead of a lot of people in how many mistakes I've been making. Right? Like, because there's that story again of like, okay, well, you must be so experienced, but my God, no, yoga is a lifetime practice, right? And so is our teaching, because it's like we're still trying to know ourselves and our.
Oh my God, I just put you on a pedestal.
Ah!
I did it. I just did it to you.
Right? I know. Because this, and I love.
Brie, you must know everything. You've been doing this for 20 years. Tell me the gospel of
Well, no, and that really, I'm glad that this all like, right. I like, love this, and it actually makes me a little bit teary, because it's just, I'm so like, look at how easy this stuff is. So this is what I'm talking about. This is why we can't, in my opinion, not just, you can't just do down dog and say that you do yoga. Like understanding the systems of the world, because what is yoga but self-awareness and understanding? And then we can see that as much as we can know about stuff, this is the waters we're swimming in. So as much as we're like, yeah, I'm a great inclusive teacher, and yeah, equality, and then like literally, yeah, like Brie, and then how easy it could have been for me to be like, yeah, well, as somebody with my 20 years experience, like this is our yoga. So everybody just witnessed a beautiful moment of yoga in action here, where Ula and I, as human frickin' people who are so beautifully imperfect and always goddamn learning, is like, you're catching this stuff. And sometimes we won't catch it ever, or somebody will catch it for us, or we get like 3 days later be like, ah, damn it, I said that thing, and da da da.
But you know what it is? It is my marketing brain. It is like, I support you with like content, and we have these like conversations around marketing, and it's like, yeah, the business of yoga, right? This is the other side of it, beyond like Brie as a experienced teacher of 20 plus years. There's like the marketing of yoga, and to market a teacher training, to, all that stuff requires making you an expert in the eyes of other people. And so it's like this, I need to grow a business, and also I don't want to be seen as a guru, because I am not that, right? So it's at odds. Like the modern life and modern marketing is almost at odds at like what we actually want to be doing. Because yeah, it'd be great if we never had to go on Instagram. Like,
I love that we're
be
talking,
nice?
and this is so freaking important, I think, because I'm glad this has came up as well, because just even this morning, I was, scrolling on social for a moment or whatever, as we do. And I've noticed, is anybody else noticing this right now? Like we were, planning to do this podcast, me and Ula, and then I'm on social media and I see one of these things in social media, because I like all the experts on their like beautiful studios. So there's like some like doctor expert on some big podcast, and she's talking to a mic in the studio, and she's really like, it's like the whole thing is set up to create an immediate assumption of like, this is an expert, they are professional. And I just had to laugh, because on one hand, as we were about to film this, part of me was like, oh shoot, should we have like rented some studio and like, again, as Ula said, like present ourselves as like, look at us, these professionals. And then I had that next thought was like, then I got annoyed at the system itself, and I was like, these stupid things, and you have to be all professional, and and then the next thought after that, because here's yoga in action, mindful awareness, I was aware of the next thought was, then I was like, wait, back to that original question as a teacher, who am I? This is why this is so, it seems so simple, but look at how it just shows up to this day for me, literally this day, this morning. And then I go back to, not in like the literal words of like, well, who am I as a teacher, but it's that then like asking like, wait, what are my values here? I do not, for me, feel comfortable. Like, sure, if somebody was like, Brie, come on my professional podcast, I'm sure I would. Like, why not? But in the content that we put out for Heart and Bones, it's not about, so yeah, it's not about like creating that higher, that's a subtle hierarchy, right? It's not like guru, but that's still a subtle hierarchy. And I really truly believe there's ways that we can show up. And I've said this for years about the business of my teaching, is like being professionally unprofessional. Like you still got to be professional, right? You don't show up as a teacher hungover with your clothes a mess and you're like, oh, I just partied so much. Like that's just unprofessional. But professionally unprofessional to me is like, how can we still be ourselves and teach and be, all I get so excited about it, because also the very act of the professionally unprofessional is then it's the connection and the reality. Because for me, it's not about, and this is the system that we're in, and marketing, as you named, forces us to be like this. But I truly believe there's a way that we can do it in a more slower, sustainable way that's about community first. That hopefully when you're hearing Ula and I talk and laugh, you're like seeing yourself in this, rather than like aspirational being like, I wish I was like that. So it's hard. my friends.
What I was thinking was like we had the debate last week when we're like, you know what, we should just record our conversations because we're constantly like, I wish someone was just a fly on the wall and they can hear the, you know, the stuff we debate and, you know, naming of a course, the naming of something, like how do you get this info out? Why are we making that? Like everything is a decision. And a big part, because we had a sec where we're like, do we rent the professional studio? Okay, well, what does that mean if we do? Right? It means, okay, moving forward, we always have to rent the studio because then it would be this weird, like, why, you know? And I love that you brought up values because in the end, we're like, you know what? Our value isn't to look like we're some hoity whatever. Our value is that we are relatable, real people who are learning. And as we're having these conversations, we're catching ourselves even. And I'm so happy that we went with this slightly more casual version. Professional part is we're going to have good audio. We're still recording ourselves, you know, well, all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to have a fake background. And I think where this segues into being a teacher is, yeah, if you're marketing yourself on, let's say, you know, Instagram, what kind of students do you want to attract? And we want to attract, you know, students that have the same values as us. And I guess that means that we have to show the real version of us, right?
Yeah, in a professionally unprofessional way, right? Where we still show up professional, exactly with the good equipment and whatnot. But yeah, being real. And I think that is how empathy is getting taken away from these systems of power. And we can reclaim our power through our yoga practice, among other and many things, showing up as ourselves. Like, okay, cool, here we are. And you as you and your classes. So I think we sort of went on a tangent. There was an original question that maybe now maybe if I can remember it correctly, might be circling back to, which was maybe, I think your question was like, what's a horror story of doing something wrong in a class?
Well, you can roll with that for sure if you have it coming. I had asked, what is something that you really took seriously or fretted about, I guess, in the past, but now you look back on and you laugh, right?
Right. Okay, it's this. I think it's this. I think at the heart of this being, okay, I have to show up as a teacher. Oh, like, okay, here it is like I had a yoga teacher voice. I think I did a post like a year ago about this, where in those early days, the studio owner like came to my classes sometimes, and afterwards she's like, "Brea, you have a yoga teacher voice. Like, it does not sound like you." And she was, I loved how blunt she was. And I was like, "What do you mean?" And then, you know, I listened to myself teaching the next time, and I was, because it was what I thought we had to do. Like, "Hi, welcome." I don't know if it's that quite that much, but it's
Like ASMR voice.
yeah.
You're like running your fingernails across something. Ooh, shiver. Like, what are you doing?
Right? Because I thought professional. I'm a yoga teacher is like, I'm like this, step your right foot forward. And it's not me, but nor should we be like totally ourselves and teach in the way that you would talk to your best friend of 80, I was going to say 80 years, but of like a long time, where you're very casual and sweet. Like, obviously we want to be professional, but the more we embody ourselves is the freedom and permission we give to others to embody themselves. And isn't that the goddamn yoga? Okay. So, and it's hard, and sorry, the algorithm does not love that. So if we're talking about promotion and running a business, no, the algorithm wants us to be different and dance for it, so to speak. And it really,
I'm gonna
yeah.
push back on you, Brie.
Talk
Is it
to
the
me.
algorithm or is it the people? Because I mean, the algorithm is trained by the people. It's like when someone tells me Instagram is full of people in bikinis on the beach. And I say, well, that's because you like looking at people in bikinis on the beach because that's what you're engaging with, right? So that's where my pushback is.
Okay, that's an interesting. I like that. I think you're not wrong. I think you're not wrong. I think you've got something there. And as somebody who's singly, I did not start out on, I actually did not want any social media. And it was my sister who was like, "Brea, you need to go." And I'm like, "No, don't make me." And so I think, yeah, and that was in the early days. That was like 20. I feel like I've been at least 10 years of posting stuff on social media. And so I have seen the algorithm change, and there's a fine line, because you're right. It's like, it's now so sophisticated that, well, you're not following your friends anymore. And it's so sophisticated currently that it does pretty quickly give you more of what you were connecting with. So that's a good thing. So then, side note, everybody, connect more with the creators and the people that you like. So hopefully the algorithm reaches you. But then there's the more darker side, I think. And of course, these tech bro oligarchs in this last year, we've really seen that and how they are siding with the systems of oppression and are not making this for the people how it used to be. And so, as somebody who does create content for my business on Instagram, I feel like you have to work way harder. What used to work doesn't work. People, you have to catch them. So in the first 3 seconds. So it's a fine line still of, yeah, Instagram's going to show you as the consumer, but also as the creator, it still doesn't do as good,
Yeah.
unless I was more controversial.
Yeah, I definitely like
Yeah.
it's easy to fall down that pipeline of creating for the platform versus creating for the ideal audience you want and like the business outcomes. And I think that's why it's like, I think for me, that's why I'm excited about doing these types of, podcasts with you, because I think you take it off that platform and let people just get to know us in a different way. And I think the mentorship program I'm really excited for as well, because I think people sometimes now conflate, like social is not that social anymore. Right.
Yeah, good point.
And as a yoga teacher, having a community that is aligned with my values and having these like real conversations is so important. Like, are you really going to have like how much depth can you go into in a 1 minute reel? And like, God forbid you do 1 minute, maybe it performs, but how many times is it the 6 second one that performs better? And not that like 1 minute cannot, but 1 minute is like still just 1 minute. Right? Versus like, wow, what would it be like to be air quotes in a room, Zoom calling with X amount of teachers where you can talk for 2 hours. And even if you're too shy to ask the question, someone is going to ask the question, right? Like, I think those deeper conversations are really difficult to have on these like dopamine platforms.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And let's see, and it's so true. And you're right. That's so much of why we're doing this. So that it can just feel, yeah, get off that 1 minute, get the hook in for 30, like in the first 3 seconds. And because also I see how the algorithm has trained our customer behavior and our own personal user behavior. It's like people aren't, well, and with that sense, yeah, just like seeing how great that one post went viral. Awesome. But did it actually translate into community engagement or engaging with like purchasing any of our like online stuff, right? Like not always. So that's also these sort of like the trap of social media. And you're so right, when we can get off of it and find ways to be building communities and online. And that's the other fun part about having done these teacher trainings for the last 7 years online pretty successfully in a lot of levels, meaning that to me, one of the views of success isn't just like, oh, we got X amount of people, but I mean successfully in the sense that we have people from all over the world. So there's a way of accessibility because there's no way most of us could all afford to actually be in person together from all the places that everybody who takes the training joins. And pretty consistently is that people say, even watching the recordings of any of our live calls or watching the recorded content of the course, it feels like it's in person. People still feel like a part of the community. And like, I hear it a lot and I'm still touched and amazed that like, oh, wow, look at the magic of how much community is important and connection is important, that even through a screen where we might unconsciously be like, I wish it was in person, or you're actually still getting that connection and you're still getting that transmission. Perfect world. Yeah. The best is all together. Sure. Reality is it just won't be that way.
I think it's a really privileged place to be like, I'm gonna just like not work for a month.
Oh my God, yes.
Like, come on, like who can really do that? Or like, even my teacher training, it was on the weekends, but it would be like weekend intensives. So can you once a month take basically 3 days where you're not available to your family, to your friends, where you have to like check out from real life? Like that's really hard. And I think like speaking of accessibility, like we also happen to live in a smaller community. There's nothing like available. I would literally have to fly somewhere. I want to backtrack just like a slight bit because we were talking about marketing and less about marketing, but I was like, oh, this is actually one of the topics of the mentorship, which is expanding beyond the weekly class model, because I feel like you're uniquely positioned to talk about that as someone who went from like traditional in-person to owning a studio, in-person physical space to now transitioning into an online space. So you've kind of had like the full gamut. You're also doing teacher training. You've done it in person and online. You've hosted workshops. We're hosting a retreat in Tuscany this year. You fly all over the world. You were just in Berlin last year teaching workshops, and you're like, so I feel like I'm so excited to hear what the conversation looks like, because as a new teacher, you think your only option is the studio system.
No, yeah, right. I know. And there's so many other ways that we can do it because actually the city in because I was gonna I
And the studio system too, you know
yeah,
me.
because there's beauty of the studio system, but I think in a lot of ways, if that's our sole thing, it's a path to burnout. So if you teaching yoga full time is your role, that's not a sustainable way of doing it. And even if it's your part time, like it really is again values. It's like, well, what do I value? How do I want to teach? Who do I want to teach? And where are those people? And how do I find them? And like I remember when I first started teaching, again, this was 20 something years ago. So at the time in the city that I was living in, there was like 2 yoga studios, I think, and I was teaching for one of them and it had just opened up. And so I think I finished my teacher training and then like literally started teaching 25 classes a week.
Oh my-
Like, and I don't think people, no. And I don't, to me, I look back at that, even sometimes 30 classes, like that was the Wild West. But because there weren't that many other teachers, I don't think anybody either, I don't think there's 25 classes available for people these days anymore because it's so saturated. But that was a quick way to pretty much hate yoga. Right. And like that is a burnout city. Like that is a lot. And then as the years went by and more studios open up, then you're like driving across the city and you're running the back and forth for these classes. And then I'd be like, oh, not another downward dog.
I remember driving to the like from one side of the city to the other, and it was a half-hour drive to teach an hour class. So I would have to like your entire evening, and I was getting paid at that time, I think $50 for the class. And I remember doing the math on that and being like, wait a minute. I'm making less than minimum wage because I'm prepping for my class. I sign people in. I teach the class. I clean the room. I say goodbye and wait until every single student is gone. And then I drive home. And I was like, oh, I'm making like below minimum wage.
Yeah.
So painful. But I also have to then invest in my training.
Yeah, and continuing education and what, yeah. So there are absolutely other ways to have more bang for your buck and more bang for your time. And really, it's like, how do we want to spend that time as well? So it's like circling back to what you're saying about the in-person teacher trainings where, yeah, that time thing of like, okay, 1 weekend a month, if it was that model. And I think the beauty of like, again, I think I love our brains just want to go into binary thinking. Our brains are like, one way's better, this way's bad. And then literally nothing is that. There's pros and cons and everything in between for all the things. So while there's beautiful things about doing a teacher training in person, one of the things that I love about an online is that you have that, like when you're in person, it's done. You can't go back to those lessons. So hopefully you wrote good notes. Hopefully you remember. But in person, or I mean online, it's like, oh, wait, I can go back to that lecture. I can listen to it again. I can listen to it 5 more times. And in fact, what I love, because for us with the teacher training, our teachers get lifetime access. I don't know about, I've seen these things where it's like you have to pay or you lose access after X amount of time. And it's like, you paid money for this. Like, anyways, and all of our future updates, it's like, this stuff's going to evolve. We want all of our alumni to continue to be continuing to learn with us. And so one of the coolest impacts about online then is that I love, like, if you went back to some of the lessons a year later after your training is done, it's like, you're hearing the same thing, but then you're hearing it in another level. And you're like, oh, that's what they meant about XYZ. And so I think having that access to our own, like just that convenience of that education and being able to come back is really powerful.
Preach. It's funny because I've held on to all of my books from different trainings. And it's like, yeah, when you're like, I hope you took good notes. I opened some of them up and I was like, what I underlined one thing.
Right. Or just in a fast scroll, you're like, what is this? What did I even like? What was this? And so even, yeah. And I think sometimes too, like, so for example, for our mentorship, here's a like behind the scenes thing too, of because it's a global reach, there's never like one time zone that works well for everybody. So Ula and I are often like, well, what's the right? And then with our teacher training, it's like, oh, okay, what are the things? And I think some people look at it going like, okay, well, that's 6 weeks. I can't make any, we had to pick a day and a time. And it made sense to make it consistent rather than like a different day and time every week. And I think some people are hesitant about it because what I've heard some questions were like, well, I'm not going to be able to make most of the calls. Is it worth it? And obviously this is a promo, like, hello, like if you're listening to this, we want you to take the mentorship because it's amazing. Like just straight up, like, my God, my friends. So I feel like as I'm saying like this feels like a sales pitch, and I guess it is, but in an authentic way, in the sense of like, because I just want to reaffirm online, because I think there is this thing, and maybe post pandemic, it's not as bad. It's more normalized and stuff. But like, even if you watch the live calls later, It really does feel like you're there. It really feels like, because it's not about you show up, right? You show up and maybe you're pressing play on the recording. So you're showing up or you're showing up to the live call, but it's not about the call itself. Again, it's that sense of hierarchy in our teaching of like, well, we got to be experts and the teacher is teaching and I have to listen. But it's like, it's what we take away and what we're doing on our own time and how we let that integrate, because it's all up here in the head. So it's like when we're learning, and as you're listening to this, it's in your head, right? This is how I see it. So it's like in your metaphorical head, it's in our thoughts. And integration and embodiment of anything takes time. And to me, it kind of starts to settle back into the body. It starts to come out of the head and be this intellectual knowledge that I could spout. Here's the 4 quadricep muscles. Da, da, da. That's intellectual knowledge. It's not going to serve you as a yoga teacher. This time between the calls, whether they're live or not, is the time that our yoga comes alive, because it just shows like, okay, well, then you're thinking about it. And you're like, well, whatever the topic was that week, it's like, okay, now I'm going to chew on this all week and I'm going to see in my classes now. Like, so I hope that sort of makes sense of like, because I think that's one of the pain points that a lot of people come up with. It's,
Yeah,
I
and
can't do
I know
live.
like we're doing homework in between,
Exactly.
air quotes homework. It's not going to be like we're going to grade you and fail you. Like you can't fail mentorship, trust me.
No.
But it is that time to process and think through it. And what was coming up for me, Brie, was like, even if I'm listening to the recording, it's the knowledge that I'm not alone in this, that I'm not the only one who thinks this way, or I'm not the only one who thought that maybe, I don't know, name the thing, how do I teach a sustainable practice? Or, if you've already invested in your teacher training. And I know I felt it when I left my teacher training, suddenly you're missing it because you're like, oh, I miss feeling part of a bigger community of teachers because suddenly I am the teacher in a class. And that's a really kind of a big jump to make, where I remember times where, yeah, people would put me on a pedestal. And I'm in my head being like, no, I'm like Miss Newbie. Please don't. Please don't. This is awkward. I feel really like the weight of being like the capital T teacher in this moment, and kind of accessing a bigger community, I think lifts that weight big time.
Big time. Because hearing it the other, yes, you're watching the recording later, you're there live, whatever it is. Yeah, you're hearing the questions that people are asking, or you've submitted your question, which then, this is what I love, by the way, one of my favorite things in the world on these calls is that like somebody can submit or share a question, and then it ends up being answered better by somebody else in the call, because we open it up for that kind of discussion depending on the question. And so I might have my opinion and be like, blah, 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 here's my answer, but does somebody else have something? And it is one of my most favorite things when invariably somebody's going to say something way better, way more concise, slightly different perspective that just enhanced it so much. So being able to see that, what I call open source, like, so if anybody knows like programming, when you do like an open source program, it's like one person builds the code and then somebody else builds on it and it's open, like we're collaborating to make something better. And we see that in action. So even if you're like, again, passively watching it later, what is time and space? It's like we are still in this kind of like beautiful collective, because what is at the core? And again, I get so excited and passionate because this is, we're using the mentorship or the teacher training as sort of a mirror of example of this, but this is you and your classes too. Back to what we've been talking about of like when we're creating an intentional space like this where people, as best we can, are feeling seen and heard and supported as they are, recognizing there's no mistakes, recognizing that we can speak and say something wrong or make a total fool, quote, quote, fool of ourselves. And it doesn't matter because we're like beautiful when my turn next, to mess up. Like that is the most powerful thing because it gives you permission to be who you are. And it gives you that gives you clarity and confidence to be who you are because you're in a space like that with people. And then as hopefully, please translating that in our classes and then hopefully translating that into our communities and families and friends so that we are no longer in this world that the world is in right now. And we are like contributing and just actively being like creating spaces, because look at how much like our descent into fascism wants us to like other, right? That's the cornerstone, is like othering. And so every time you create a class, it's small, it's not going to bring down fascism single-handedly, oh my God. But when you bring classes and you're teaching classes and you have people, again, those inclusive, accessible ways of teaching and having people being seen and celebrated as they are, That's huge. That is no small feat. It is no small feat, my friends. So, anyways, and so you get to experience that as a student, of course, and anything in Heart and Bones we offer, hopefully, as best we can as a model, even though we're going to do it imperfectly at times too.
I love this conversation. We've got more episodes coming, more stories, more behind the scenes. And if you're a yoga teacher or someone considering taking or even upgrading, I would say, your training, and you feel like you need a little bit of support, a little bit more clarity, Brea, you're going to be leading our mentorship, which might be exactly what our, the listener really does need. And of course, we do have our 200 and our 300-hour teacher training available as well. So I'm going to put into the description all the links and information you may need if you're curious about either of those options. But if you're listening close to our launch for either mentorship or teacher training, I mean, the doors are open. But that's a beautiful thing about podcasts. I mean, I don't know when you're listening to this, so click the link.